Hi, everyone. Welcome to our next Leading Digital Era. Today, you're going to meet some great people talking about relationships. And one of our guests, Nigel Lemon, came up with a quote during our prep. Technology is not at the heart of a relationship. And I loved it. And for me, everything's about relationship. At its core, relationships, whether business or life, relationships are built on trust, communication, and shared purpose. In today's digital era, technology serves as an enabler, but it's the human connections that truly drive success. So in today's digital era, where we explore the intersection of technology, leadership, and business transformation, we're driving a crucial conversation about how organizations can prioritize what truly matters, the customer experience. From aligning strategic initiatives with customer needs to unlocking long-term advocacy and growth, we'll explore how businesses can foster meaningful relationships that drive a lasting impact. So to start, I'd like to welcome Michelle Martinez. Hi,
And
Michelle.
great to see you, Rob.
Welcome. Michelle is a seasoned executive and customer experience leader with a passion for driving loyalty and business growth through customer obsession. With experience spanning startups to multi-billion-dollar enterprises, she specializes in aligning customer insights with financial goals to create a competitive edge. Through a data-driven, cross-functional approach, she has successfully led customer-centric transformations, saving millions for companies like Wayfair, achieving double-digit growth for HomeServe, and launching innovative home service products. A thought leader in customer experience, Michelle has managed 100 million plus P&Ls, built high-performing teams, and enabled retention through technology and AI-driven solutions. She believes well-designed experience fuel organic growth while neglecting customer insight erodes business value. Always challenging the status quo, Michelle blends an expertise with people-first mindset to create a lasting impact while having fun along the way. Welcome, Michelle. We're going to have some fun today.
Yeah, absolutely. So glad to be here.
Well, thank you for being here. Next on the list is Michelle's friend, Nigel.
Hi, Rob. Hi, Michelle.
Hi.
Hey, Nigel.
So besides a great taste in hairdos, Nigel is an international executive with non-executive director and a powered track-driven record in driving large-scale digital transformation and business growth. As a strategic advisor to Bain & Company, he helps organizations leverage technology to create competitive advantage and long-term value. With leadership roles spanning CIO, managing director, and strategy director across multiple industries, Nigel specializes in aligning technology with business strategy to enhance customer experiences and operational efficiency. Having worked across 3 continents, he excels in building high-impact teams and getting organization growth through complex change. Thank you for joining us, especially from overseas today, Nigel. I'm happy to have you here.
My pleasure. Thanks for the intro.
And rounding out our team today is Ted Carlson, President of Marketing Technology, CBIZ. Welcome, Ted.
Good afternoon.
Ted leads a full-service integrated solutions vendor specializing in data protection, disaster recovery, cybersecurity, network infrastructure, intelligent automation, talent acquisition, and managed services. Under his leadership, so Ted, is it Markham Technology or CBIZ now?
It's now CBIZ, yeah. The company was acquired a couple months ago.
Okay. CBIZ delivers cutting-edge technology solutions that empower businesses to enhance security efficiently, and resilience in increasingly digital world. With decades of experience in technology and business transformation, Ted is dedicated to helping organizations navigate complex IT challenges while driving innovation, sustainable growth. Based out of New York, Ted leads a team committed to delivering strategic technology solutions that create long value for his client across industries. And if you haven't met Ted and built a relationship with him, I haven't found the person that can sing better than Ted in New York yet. Ted, welcome.
Thank you.
So before we get started, I think this conversation was fostered out of a deeper conversation Michelle and I had about how to build great relationships, customer-centric value relationships. And it started with an idea Michelle had on a hierarchy of building that relationship, which I'm going to ask Michelle to share with us today. So do you mind at least building that foundation for us today, Michelle?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. And if I were better prepared, I'd have a lovely slide here with a triangle on it. You'd all be looking at this pyramid. At the bottom layer of a pyramid, when I think about customer experience and how do I kind of put that into a hierarchy and understanding of what are the two true drivers of, as Rob, you said in the intro, what I'm passionate about, which is having customer experience be the organic growth engine of your organization. That's ultimately what you want your customer experience to do. You want it to create such passionate advocates about your business that they're going and telling everybody and their brother how fantastic you, your company, your service, whatever it may be, is. And the way you get to that is, and this is the way I like to think about it as a business, this is what you have to deliver in order to achieve that. At the foundation, you have to build trust with your customer, and you build trust by delivering kind of the core function that you have. So whether it's with makeup and it's supposed to cover something up, well, you have to make sure it covers it up. Or if it's a business service and you promise to, from a security perspective, provide a level of security, well, you have to be able to achieve what it is that you set the expectation to the customer that you're going to deliver. So that's that trust building layer. That essentially is the basic point of entry. Now, once you get above that trust level, now the next thing you need to do in your customer experience is you need to make it frictionless. You need to make it easy to do work with somebody. Now, a lot of times, particularly with the rise of Amazon, there was a lot of talk in customer experience around how frictionless was the pinnacle and that's what everybody was looking for. The reality of it being is it's not the pinnacle. It is a core component and it is that middle tier that's important. And when a business is frictionless, it enables you to further expand your existing business relationship. But it doesn't quite get you to the point of being that pinnacle of where you've gotten your customers to rant and rave about you all the time. That's that next piece to the top of that pyramid, which is make the experience memorable. And once you've made the experience memorable, obviously in a positive way, not in a negative way, once you've made it memorable, that's when you've achieved that state that your client, your customer is going to be in, that they're now going to share who you are with their friends and family. So that's how I like to think of kind of organizing that structure around customer experience.
Thank you, Michelle. So, Ted, as a I know many of your customers and what you guys do over at CBiz. Can any thoughts on this? Ted, you're on mute. You're still on mute, Ted.
Yeah, I think it's superior client services. So exceptional services is what stands out amongst the competition. At the end of the day, these clients have many choices and many options. But that's the number one thing. But that can't happen until you build the trust and relationship. You got to start there. You got to stop hitting the snooze button. You got to get out. You got to see customers, lunches, dinners, executive roundtables. We're big advocates on that.
So you're following the same paradigm as Michelle and Nigel, that as a CIO and as internal IT leadership, our clients are everyone in an organization, right? And I know you've played both roles, right? But building that trust and that foundation and then making a memorable experience, and that trust is critically important. How do you apply this same framework Michelle's building in and out of an organization?
That's a great point, because I think Michelle mentioned Amazon there, and what ends up happening is that organizations set a benchmark by which then people both internally and externally measure your performance. And whether you like it or not, those benchmarks are going to get set. And part of the challenge, as a CIO and in an internal technology organization, is with the consumerization of technology now and the expectations around smartphones and apps. People want their internal systems to work as well as they find they work on the outside of the organization. So, the benchmark, both whether you are internally as a CIO thinking about your internal customers and consumers within the organization, or you're thinking about your external ones, someone out there is setting a benchmark that is going to become the norm. And that's the continuous challenge, because that keeps on moving and the expectations move with it. And Michelle says, in terms of the pyramid, that may only just get you to first base in terms of just being frictionless and making it, that doesn't necessarily get you the loyalty, the trust, and the advocacy that you're actually pursuing.
So I'm going to dive deep on this, Nigel, because I love that point, which is so often I hear from people, well, what I do in a B2C space isn't relevant to B2B. Like those are two totally different things. And here's the thing, the people that are purchasing in a B2C space are the same people that go to the office and purchase services in a B2B space. And so the expectations that they have from a customer experience perspective and they see in B2C, which very often we consider to be kind of the, I'll call it the bleeding edge of customer experience, they bring those expectations with them into the B2B space. It's exactly what you said. And it's also fascinating that, it used to be you could say, well, compared to my competitors within, let's say, the banking industry, I do banking really well. Well, nobody's comparing you to your competitors in the banking industry. They're comparing you to some other little upstart in, some B2C space
Absolutely.
that just came up with a fabulous experience. And that's where their bar is now. I love that point that you made, that the bar is ever moving in customer experience, which is why as businesses, we can't be satisfied with where we are today. We have to keep innovating and thinking about how others are thinking about customer experience, particularly in the B2C space as B2B owners.
Totally
So,
agree.
so I know we toyed with this and we were back and forth in this, but let's just dive right in. How do we measure, right? As an IT leader, we talk about KPIs, OKRs. How do we measure help desk calls or performance? But how do we measure the customer experience capital, and what are some indicators of success, and where do we get that from? So, Michelle, you started this, but I'm going to go right back at you. Where do you stand on this?
So this is probably what has been the biggest failure in customer experience, quite honestly, over the last 3 years or so, is the failure to be able to translate successes from a customer experience perspective into financials, because financials dollars are the universal language of business. And what has happened is that a lot of customer experience teams are like, well, my NPS is up or my CSAT is up, but who cares? Because it's not translated into the physical dollars, which is what everybody's being measured by. So the core and key element to really being able to identify and understand the impact of a change in the customer experience in aggregate to the bottom line has to do with, and this is why I love having this conversation with you guys, has to do with data and the integration of data across a business and kind of threading that data through from every single department with the needle of customer centricity. Once you can do that and you thread those pieces together, you can now have an understanding of, okay, not the help desk ticket in isolation, but the help desk ticket in addition to the live support from this person, in addition to the product configuration that this person had, in addition to these other pieces. Well, when I tie all those things together, now I can have an understanding of, ooh, this customer that had all those experiences has a customer lifetime value of X, and I can understand how somebody that had a completely divergent experience has a customer lifetime of only Y. And then you can start to break apart what are the levers that are beginning to impact the value of that customer, because I have an understanding from a data perspective of all the interactions that that person has had within the organization and what has been a lever and what hasn't necessarily been a lever in that experience.
That's great. Ted, anything from your end? I mean, you run teams that are building these relationships often. How do you measure you and your teams with their relationships with their?
Yeah, internally, I mean, we have happiness committee, we have retention departments, we have service excellence group as well. And we just put a lot of time and energy and effort into training our staff, to make sure that they can solve some of the most difficult challenges before having to escalate to middle management or higher and above. So, we believe in, training and actually signing people up for Dale Carnegie courses and other types of, courses that are going to help them become a human being. So we feel that's very important. Communication is key.
So communication, I like that part of how to be a human being. I think some of that gets lost every now and then in a I really like that phrase, by the way. I think that gets lost often. Not Nigel, any thoughts on you on the measurement of?
Yeah, because I guess, I love my finance colleagues dearly, but I sit in a part of the business that too often is measured by all its inputs, not its outputs. Any successful IT transformation, it's a business success. The failed ones are always down to the IT function. So, it's just a reality, as Michelle says. I think, one of the things to think about it is that net present value of customers. How would it be beneficial if we lowered acquisition costs We retain a given customer for longer, we lost fewer customers. You start to add some of those numbers up, and pretty soon you've got quite a compelling business case. You add into that more incremental sales, cross-selling, and you can very quickly show a pretty meaningful return on having more loyal, better customers, and those that advocate for you, lowering your acquisition costs, and those sort of things. So I think there's a really good business case to go after, and certainly some of those costs the finance colleagues will have at hand, and they can be used as the input. But it's, I always say a business case has three elements. It can only ever be made up of fact, fear, and faith. And you know, I think customer experience and the potential capital for a business in that hits on all three of those. You know, what if our customers don't stick with us and they leave? What if we can actually get some more customers? And guys, why wouldn't it make sense to make our customers happier? Are they going to spend more money and stick with us longer if they're happier, or are they more likely to leave? It's you know, it shouldn't be too much of a leap of faith to believe that's a good thing to do.
Of course, I think that and you hit a pretty big nail on the head there. The value of keeping a customer versus getting a new customer is the easy path, right? Hold on, we have a question. CFOs really don't allocate budgets based on NPS and Cs because well, here we go, same thing here, right? By connecting customer value, we can bridge the gap by keep friend. Wonderful comment, just supporting where we're going. Michelle, did you want to lean on the KPI stuff? Like Michelle, I think the most widely phrased used term since the first day of COVID is return on the.
After all this time, we would get this right, for crying out loud.
Okay. No one heard that before Zoom hit the world after COVID either. You never heard it. Right? We got to Gary Sorrentino on that one.
You can make it a drinking game at one point.
Yeah.
So the comment I was going to make was, Nigel said something that I loved, and I think too often leaders don't think about this, which is, what are the ramifications if I don't do this? So they spend a lot of time thinking about what's the cost of doing this, but they don't think about what happens if I don't do this. So say if it's an upgrade, I've been in a lot of organizations where it's a question of a CRM, right? Really significant investment, really significant disruption to the business, transformation, change, all of that goes at play. And there's always a lot of question around, do we really need to do this? Is this really, what's the value we're going to get out of it? And what I started pushing organizations on was to say, that's a valid question. But the other question you need to add to this equation is, what happens if we don't do it? If we don't have the capability to integrate our data in the way that we need to in order to truly understand who our customers are, what they value, what they're purchasing, how they're purchasing it, then you're going to get some upstart that now it's easier than ever for businesses to essentially start and get a pretty strong foothold. You're going to get some upstart that's going to now come and disrupt your industry and take market share away from you. That's something that you have to put into that equation as you start thinking about how much does something cost as an investment. You also have to think about what's the detracting piece of it if you don't do it. And the other piece that I think Nigel started to talk about, and even at the top we were talking about, is this kind of KPI piece. So Rob, you had mentioned, like, what are the KPIs you're looking at? Very often what I see in organizations is that different groups, functional groups within an organization, have different KPIs that they're being assessed by. And more often than not, it's marketing and sales. Marketing and sales have two disparate KPIs, two KPIs that if both of them succeed, they break the company. Either one, if marketing succeeds, sales loses, or if sales wins, marketing loses. And instead of trying to think of it as a win and lose, those KPIs should really actually be developed at an even higher level across the entire organization and then flowed into each team, so that there's unity about that around those KPIs and an understanding of the impact of each of those onto every single group within that lens of customer experience.
I'm sorry. So why wouldn't they succeed together?
So as an example, yeah. So like if the BD team is one of their metrics, this was actually a client of mine, one of their metrics was how many phone calls they would have with a customer. And they were bonused every time they had a phone call with a prospect, not a customer, with a prospect that would come in. But what marketing was being bonused on lowering the cost of acquisition. So they were pushing for more digital experiences. So here you have two groups where marketing is trying to drive a more digital experience and is trying to avoid a customer from calling into the BD team. And the BD team is trying to have more phone conversations because that's what they're being bonused on.
Interesting. So then how do we scale when companies grow? And Ted, this might be a great conversation for you, especially considering your company's acquisition and or the acquisition of CBIZ and Markham and the scale you guys went through. How do you take these patterns and grow and scale and maintain what you're doing without losing any quality in the acquisition of new companies, of new customers?
Yeah, I mean, acquiring new customers is costly. It gets very expensive. You know, we try and do a really good job at retaining our existing clients. We have a 98% retention rate. So I'm involved with 80 marketing events a year. So we do an extremely amount of client events, whether it's executive roundtables, whether it's annual golf outing that we do every year. We have our top clients show up to that. We have about 180 customers there. We have all our strategic partners there. So everybody getting to know one another, building up the network, keeping the community strong, you know, really just getting out is the main thing. Like they say, right? Showing up is the toughest part. So,
But as
my two cents.
as you get more customers, you can't duplicate that. How are you scaling you to get more to continue to build these deep relationships, which I've seen you build these deep relationships with everybody. How does everybody continue to have that intimate relationship with you as your company continues to grow?
Yeah, it's not an easy juggling act. That's for sure. Having a really good, strong inside team helps out a great deal. Having really good, strong, you know, admins helps. You know, inside sales team helps. And you know, building up a good, strong community of account managers. So a lot of folks that have industry experience, you know, professionals that have been in the industry, CIOs, CTOs, and CISOs that have formerly retired, that are looking to get off the couch and not stare at the wallpaper all day, come back to work 2-3 days a week. Those are the folks we're bringing back. So, you know, everybody's entitled to a job. Everybody wants to work. People like to be busy, you know. If not, you develop too many bad habits. So
It's a unique approach to something different than I guess than you're going to a different approach. So Nigel, what are you doing to scale your to continue the same customer experience as your user base grows?
Well, I think this is, you know, for us, it's, and in my experience, it's about where you get that blend between inevitably technology, because that has a great aid to scalability, but with process standardization, but not making it impersonal. And most of all, having a really customer-centric culture. So as you go do those things, you remain focused on the customer. And, you know, the kind of things you need to do is you need to make sure, and I guess as largely a technology guy, I'm going to say this, but, you know, a really robust technology infrastructure and data capability in order that you can automate, but with a personal touch, and that you can join up an understanding of the customer across all the different touch points. So, you know, that helps enormously. Things like omni-channel, making sure that omni-channel is a true and live, and that whichever way a customer contacts you, makes any interaction with you, you see that and it comes together, so that you don't have silos of data or silos of activity that where one part of the organization doesn't see what a customer's doing. So I think leveraging digital self-service as well, giving, you know, for very routine things, certainly in our world and in B2B, you know, sometimes the customer's quite happy to serve themselves. So why not let them do that and devote your resources, your energy, and your capabilities to the deepening of a relationship in a much more personal and meaningful way, a memorable way, than carrying out a basic transaction that they just as quite happily do themselves and crack on and do that. And I think that's one thing, you know, we spoke earlier about the consumerization of technology even. You know, people are more used to doing those things for themselves, both in the B2C world and the B2B world. So take advantage of that and dedicate your valuable resources and time and people to deepening the relationships around the important stuff. And ultimately it is that customer-centric culture that, Michelle talked about, KPIs that can work against each other. I think one of the great dangers in the sales and the sort of hoping to win new business, you can drive short-term business gains against long-term relationships. So sales are incentivized to bring more business in, but the transition of that customer and the onboarding of that customer, the service and the experience they get is poor because the organization can't cope potentially with how many customers they're winning. Nice problem to have, but if those customers have a poor relationship, how long are they going to stay with you? How good is their advocacy going to be if they bought the sale and then had a bad experience? So I think it's about bringing all those things together, as it always is, to create that really customer-centric culture that makes the customer have memorable experiences, as we talked about, not just good experiences.
And I think what I love about what you just said, Nigel, is the piece of the figuring out the memorable piece, in addition to really understanding. And I just lost my train of thought because that's what happens when you hit 50, guys. I will come back to it. Isn't that great? I know we have another topic we want to talk about, but it was something I really wanted to lean into, and I was so excited about it.
I think we did have a compliance guest.
Wait,
Tell me.
don't let me forget because it will go. So the piece that was really important to me was this trust piece, and thinking about how also you're putting these elements together. And I appreciate very much the notion of what you should figure out to make memorable versus not memorable. When you think about scaling, what people really miss and they don't think about well, I think very often, is the stuff that you can easily, I'll say, push into self-serve or kind of enable technology to really help you with, are the things where it's low trust, right? You don't require a lot of trust in that interaction, and high frequency, right? So things like you just said, like, I have a question about my billing statement. I don't need to have, it's not a high trust conversation to talk about my billing statement. Let me do that on my own independently. But now when you start talking about what are the things that you want to invite the human into, the human in the loop into, those are the more trusted conversations you want to have a human integrated into. So let's just say I've got one version of a product and I want to think about, maybe I need a step up from that product. Well, that might actually be a better conversation to have with a person from a trusted perspective. It requires more trust and understanding of who you are, who your business is, to be able to have that conversation. So as you think about scaling as an organization, it's really important to think about what are the low trust transactional elements to your experience. Go ahead and do those as self-serve. Those that are high trust and are really advisory, not transactional, and have a lot of emotion tied to them, those are the ones that you want your human in. And so as you think scale, think about those two continuums.
Thank you, Michelle. Well, here's a great question from Fancy. Compliance and customer experience, how do you balance the two? Which is a really interesting conversation, especially in where we are now. When we talk about AI, we talk about cybersecurity, but there are things that we have to do and things we don't always have to do. But from a compliance and a customer experience perspective, where do you guys sit where we must and have to do these things, but we also want to provide good customer service, and people are asking for things that are outside of the realm of what we must do? And Nigel, I come to you first, especially from an IT leader perspective, when there are things we have to do. Where do you sit on this side?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, we've got to be compliant with those rules and regulations if we're in business. I mean, it's that classic experience when you've been on the phone, pressed 6 different numbers to get to where you want to get to, probably entered your customer number, and then the advisor, when they answer the call, then asks you your customer number again and asks you to confirm date of birth, mobile number, email address. And actually, I think that's a really good small example of how actually with the right technology and the right data, that can be a much smoother experience than you having to repeat everything. You can if the data is already up to date, they know you, then that experience can be much slicker, and make sure that if a customer actually punches in a customer number or a membership number, something into their phone, that their first interaction is that they're recognized. Don't ask them for that all over again. And yet that instance happens so often. So again, I think it's coming back. We don't really have a choice around compliance, but the way we do compliance can still be in a much more customer customer-centric way if we sit down and think about it and make it as good an experience for the customer as it can possibly be.
So let me just go back and do one more example, Nigel. I'm going to pick on you a little bit, knowing some of the problems you have to deal with, but knowing where you're sitting and knowing GDPR and the things you have to deal with. But you might have a customer coming in and say, "Hey, delete my data," but then you have salespeople and marketing that say, "I need that data." You can't please everyone all the time.
No, definitely not. But at the end of the day, as long as the data isn't personally identifiable, then we can retain it. So there are ways of looking at how you handle that data and use that data. That it's not about getting around the data protection. It's about making sure you're compliant. But it doesn't necessarily mean that some of that data, which isn't personally identifiable, you necessarily have to lose. You just make sure that it isn't attributed to any given individual.
So Ted, I know you deal with a lot of cyber customers and deal with compliance all day long. How are you handling compliance versus customer service?
Well, we have our own internal compliance, and then we have our own external consulting compliance, and both seem to be extremely challenging. When we were a much smaller firm, we didn't have to worry about it so much. But now that we're much larger now, everybody's asking about it. I feel knowledge is power, so clients do want to get out. They want to learn more about their compliance challenges. We've been working with a lot of the highly regulated industries like insurance and banking. So it's an ongoing challenge. We've done a lot of road shows in the past. I had the former CISO of the White House that used to work for us out of our Boston office, and we were doing road shows on GDPR and the right to be forgotten. And we had full rooms, conference rooms, boardrooms packed. People just wanting to come out, understanding what the challenges are and really just trying to address the gap on how to get there. So, I think education is key. I think you got to join more networking groups. You got to get out. You got to pay attention to more webinars. And your company hopefully will allow you to get out and do some training too, just to keep up with the what's going on. It's challenging today. We all get busy with our jobs, and nobody takes the time out to get trained properly. So it's a big challenge today. And you're either doing it in-house or you're outsourcing it, one or the other.
So I do like the getting out there and training, and that might lead us to our next topic, right? So how are you aligning your customer experience efforts with the business goals and profitability? So Michelle, if we can start off with you here. So I'm looking more for the building the customer success journey roadmap and making sure it's aligned with everybody else within the organization. How would you go out and trying to give some of our people watching some real world tools so they can go out and do that? Can you take us through some of your strategies?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, it's building relationships with all the other functional heads within an organization. And how do you do that? You have to think about the relationship. I think of it on three different levels. One is build a personal relationship with them, and that has everything to do with share something vulnerable about yourself. The second is have an understanding of what they're trying to achieve personally from a business perspective. Like, what do they want? I want to be the SVP of marketing, in 2 years from now, or I want to achieve something else. I want to be on a board in 2 years. Understand what their personal business goal is. And then the third layer of it is understand the overarching business goal that they and their team have. Once you have an understanding of those three pieces, as you start to build case studies, use studies, stories around data that you have, you now can come to those individuals and you can now paint a picture in a language that will be meaningful to them. So now I can go to somebody and say, hey, I found this insight regarding something from a customer experience perspective. Tie it directly back to what do they want to achieve for their personal goal. And I think that if we can fix this, it might actually help you get your SVP promotion sooner than later. And I see that it also hits one of those goals that you have for your business unit of trying to lower acquisition costs, right? So you can now frame the story in the terms that are of interest to that person. And once you start to do that, you're now able to, as you think about the hierarchy of things that we have to do on our to-do list as business owners, you can now work collaboratively with those people and interject that within that list in the right place from a priority perspective, because you've been able to substantiate the value of that change from a customer experience perspective into a language that's meaningful to them.
So I like that. I like that, spreading the language that's meaningful to each person and knowing how to have those conversations. Again, building relationships to each individual person internally as well. Ted, how about you? How did this resonate with you?
Just,
internally?
I think you kind of know how a conversation is going to go with somebody based upon all the metrics and SLAs. You kind of can predict in advance to see how that's going to go. So I think, the more QBRs that you do with these clients and, the frequent calls and visits really helps out. Communication is critical and key. We got a question coming in.
No, Mitch Lasky is saying the same things you are. And
Great.
I'm going to plan that in a minute with Ted, but I don't want to distract you from your answer.
Right.
So building your roadmap internally in your company to build that customer service journey across everybody.
Yeah, I think it's not an easy journey. It's a long journey, and nothing's going to happen overnight. It's just, it takes time, and it really depends how well you know the customer. Going back to Michelle's questions earlier, is just you got to build the relationship, right? You got to have the trust. Otherwise, you're never going to get clear answers. So I think you got to start there and, allow the team to participate and help out as well. It's not always based upon one individual, right? It's a team effort. You're as good as your weakest link. So you want to make sure that you get to these problems immediately. You don't want to let things sit and wait. You want to take ownership of it. And, good news travels quick. Bad news travels even faster. So that's my 2 cents.
And building that trust is important. So Nigel, I'd like to go with you in a little different spin on this, right? And not so much the roadmap, but something that both Michelle and Ted hit on with the trust and the roadmap. But an IT person doesn't normally get out there, right? So, you're going to have guys people in your organization that should be out there in front of the client, maybe not, or didn't grow up in a role that would be comfortable getting out to the business. How are you encouraging your team to build these relationships, and what does that look like from a support, growth, education perspective in getting them to build that trust and get out there and build those relationships throughout the organization, and then extending to the larger customers, which might be customers of your organizations?
Sure. No, it's a good question, and it's going to sound like I'm making this up on the spot, but I just had a meeting today with my leadership team where we were talking about exactly this. So there's a couple of things happening with us. We've got a new customer experience VP in North America, and she's really driving some great work. And we were echoing, well, how do we pick that up and use it both internally for IT, but the discussion also came out from a recent leadership event. How do we get our teams a little closer to the business and the business objectives, some of the challenges? So what we're doing a couple of things. One is we're going to survey our internal customers in IT in exactly the same way that we're going to survey the external customers, and we're going to start to measure ourselves in a similar sort of way as an IT team. And then secondly, we're going to make sure the team at least on a frequency of once or twice a year minimum, which doesn't sound often, but it's more than it is now, actually goes out and spends time with a sales rep and or in one of our operational centers to get that proximity to the issues and the sort of challenges, and just, as you say, break out of that silo. And I think, to Michelle's great point, to be truly customer centric, you've got to break down the sort of some of the classic silo function organizations that we've been put into, so people can look across the organization, so that they work on customer problems in a collaborative way rather than being handed off. And some of the classic challenges of sales handing things off to finance and finance handing things off to sales, it's just as applicable to my teams. We need to be better integrated with what the rest of the organization is doing. So sometimes it's simple steps and it's small steps, but those can make a big difference.
Nigel, and before we get into our last question, and maybe it's the hairdo, maybe it's growing up as an IT leader, but any specific experience you can call on where having that relationship helped you get through a difficult difficult experience that might have gone another way if you didn't have that relationship in your organization?
Yeah, I mean, I guess several, but I'm just trying to think of something spontaneously that right now. I mean, I think in terms of I will give you an example. I was working in Europe a few years ago for a large FMCG company, and early on we'd had a new head of our export business appointed, and he was fairly dyed in the wool. Doesn't really want to have anything to do with technology, isn't really helpful, and nothing we do is ever any good for him. So I sat down with him one day, had a conversation. Long story short, what I decided to do was actually break out of the normal corporate policy and give him an iPad, because he traveled continuously and his big moan was getting his laptop out, firing it up. So I gave him an iPad. Thought it was the best thing since sliced bread, loved it. It really made his travel easier. And then, lo and behold, a few months later, we were trying to do a project to give him better analysis of some of his promotional spend in Europe. And, I won't go into detail, but it didn't go well. It was interesting, because having gone from probably what it would have been the first person to criticize us and certainly, jump all over me for the way that project was going at the time, that earlier relationship and the fact I'd solved a very simple problem for him, nothing difficult about it, but it really it resonated with him. I think gave me a lot more sort of opportunity to get that project back up on track, keep his support, have him not throw me under the bus right away, and use that relationship. In the end, we got there, but it was bumpy. But he stayed as a supportive part of the governance, rather than necessarily doing what he might have done under other circumstances.
Thank you, Nigel. That's a great conversation, and that goes to show how these relationships are important. And it looks like Jose agreed. He walking a day in the life in someone else's shoes. So I think we might have time for one more question, unless we go quick. But I'd be remiss if I didn't throw an AI question out there for you guys. And so as AI and automation evolve, and I do believe AI applied imagination, not only artificial intelligence, right? But how can companies maintain a human-centric experience while leveraging new technologies like either AI or chatbots or stuff like that, and continue to build these deep, intimate relationships? And I'd be remiss if I didn't go with our AI tech company here, TED, to start. So TED, how do we continue to leverage technology but continue to build these deep relationships? How are you doing it?
It's that 50-pound phone. You have to be willing to pick it up, and you have to make the calls. You have to get out. You have to network. I've been doing this as long as most of the folks on this call today, and I've been through it all. Y2K, steam pipe explosion, Hurricane Sandy, 9/11, Northeast blackout. And the one thing these clients want is the golden Rolodex. They want to know you're willing to be there for them and pick up the phone when needed and come through each and every time. So that's half the battle.
You still give me your phone number?
I do.
Do you? All right. So TED phone number.
I'm not going to pick it now, so.
Thank you. Well, we're almost done, so we know if they need. Thank God there are no blackouts right now.
Yeah, the human touch. That's really what it is. Leveraging AI behind the scenes is great, but customer facing is essential.
Thank you, Ted. Nigel, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's going to be lots of ways, and I think AI isn't anything new in some senses. It's got a lot of publicity recently, but I mean, I think offering the chat, opportunity for really hyper personalization, that you can really start to process a lot of data, automate a lot of things to really understand your customer data better, and look at tailored recommendations. Just look what Amazon does in terms of looking at buying patterns, what you might have looked at. I mean, but do that in a much better way. Natural language processing is going to help automate some tasks and make it much more seamless from some of the early experiences with chatbots and those sort of things. I think the ability to have much more human-like conversations with what will be a machine, and I think people will also get a bit more used to that, so perhaps they become more accepting. But again, I think what will differentiate people or organizations is doing that in a customer-centric way, doing it in the right way at the right time, to Michelle's point, for the right kind of transactions, but where ultimately, to Ted's point, where someone wants to speak with a human being and have that contact, make sure you make that an option. Don't ever force people into a cul-de-sac where the only option is one that they don't want. And I think helping to really make the experience automated, swift, frictionless, to Michelle's point earlier on, but then have the ability to pop out and have that human contact, that human relationship that Ted talks about. I think the range of different types of AI that's out there, I think they all add to that, actually, rather than detract from it. But as always, it's a fool with a tool is going to be a fool. It's not the tool that makes the difference.
Thank you, Nigel.
God, I love that. A
Michelle.
fool with the tool is still a fool. I love it. I'm going to use that all day long. So I think there's so much there, Nigel, that I would pull on, because it's so great. I think the one is, I certainly still feel like there's so many opportunities to augment the human with AI. When I think about very specifically some of the customer facing teams, when they're having an interaction with a client or with a customer, instead of having them have access to 8 different screens with 7 different systems behind it, whatever it may be, and all that level of complexity, being able to pull those elements together with AI and help surface the important information in that conversation enables the human to be better, more empathetic in their conversation, less focused on the tactical, which I think is the huge value that AI brings the opportunity. But it goes back to that point that you said too, around, you have to be really smart about where you want to apply AI, and you have to think about, where are those transactions where, yep, it absolutely makes sense. It's a kind of low trust type of environment, it's highly transactional. It's not an environment, going back to Ted, your point, like someone's upset about something. Do not put AI in front of somebody who's upset about something. That's a golden opportunity for you to build a relationship, fix that problem, make that a human interaction. So having an understanding of how to differentiate between those two. And then the last benefit that I see from an AI perspective is, back to Nigel's point around really helping to surface insight. So I still think that we are all swimming in a sea of data. We have not had the capability yet, largely across the board, to be able to translate all of that data into something that's meaningful and that really brings about insight. And I think being able to leverage AI for some of those leaders that are not analysts, and be able to leverage tools like that to be able to extract value out of all the data that exists within an organization, I think that's going to be tremendously powerful and valuable.
Yeah, just if I can build on that, I mean, I read a quote, I think it was Brian Solis, who said that building customer experience capital is where technology meets empathy. And I don't think AI changes that formula. It just, as Michelle says, can enhance it. And it's when those two things come together, you do it well and you create value. You do it badly and you have the opposite effect.
So I agree. I mean, I think the human touch is still very important. I have a very good friend. We met in person through a networking group. Phil Dundas. He was on our show we did about technology and manufacturing, and we were at a networking event, ironically, at CBiz the other day, and I met his CISO for the first time, and he says, "Go introduce yourself to my CISO and give him a hug," right? Because if you guys were here, I would hug you. That's what I do, right? That's how I make my connection. And I hugged his CISO. And my first hug outside of my family in COVID was in VR, right? So I think that technology can bring ways that we can bring that human element together, but I still think that it is the connection is less technology and more authenticity and a proper way of building that connection. And John, if you can pop up that last comment that was made. I don't remember who it was, but I remember what they said. And I would say people will never remember what you did for them, but how they make you feel. That's one of my very favorite comments. And this was great. And as we're going to close here, I think if people feel you're out there for them, they'll be your first call. I don't care what industry you're in, what you do for a living, or where you are, right? If you make people feel that they're valued or that you're there for them, you will always be their first call. And I'm here, what I do and where I am because of my network, and I feel for me. And you're all here because of, Nigel called, Michelle called. I said, Michelle, who are you going to call? And she says, I'm going to call Nigel. One person. I called Ted. Ted, we got here, and I want to thank you guys. And I'm going to give you a great big virtual hug, and I'm going to give everyone a virtual hug for being here. This was a great conversation for me. I truly appreciate all your insights and your time. I want to thank everyone for John. John, I'm going to give you a hug for producing the Institute for publishing this. And I truly appreciate everyone's time and for giving yourself today. And hopefully everyone will make a meaningful connection today and then comment tomorrow after when John posts this. Michelle puts her graphic up and shows everyone what her triangle looks like and the foundation of building great intimate connections, which hopefully we all spend the rest of our lives doing. So thank you everybody today for being here and watching, and stay tuned for more coming from the Institute, the Digital Dialogue, and some really cool, new, great stuff thought up by the Institute coming soon. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks for joining Leading in the Digital Era, presented by the Institute for Digital Transformation and hosted by Robert Field. Look for new episodes coming to a LinkedIn live session at noon on the second Tuesday of every month. Can't join Robert for the live session? You can catch the replay anytime on our YouTube channel.